Hello, I'm Beverley Gray, and since my earliest memory, I felt a deep connection to the natural world, especially the world of wild food and medicinal plants. Now, in my life as a herbalist, author, teacher, and creator of herbal medicines, I share this passion with others. So join me as we explore the healing world of plants on this edition of the Boreal Herbal. It's late summer in the Yukon and the fireweed is in full bloom. It's actually so exciting because I love to gather the fireweed for food and medicine and preserve it for the long winters here in the north. So how do you harvest fireweed? Well, actually we start early in the spring here in the north when the little tender green shoots are out. They're quite small and very tasty. In the north we call it wild asparagus, and it's really good steamed up, or you can make it into a tea as well. I like to dry them and preserve them for later on in the season. Then we can move into the roots. At that point, you can still dig the roots. So the roots should be dug either in the early spring or later in the fall. We also like to harvest the leaves. So when the plant is flowering, like it is right now, what I generally do is I will just cut a stalk off. I'll gather a bunch and I'll hang them up in my drying house, or I will just come along and gather the flowers. Fireweed flower and leaf tea is excellent for the whole digestive systems. It actually acts as a balancer as well because there's mucilaginous qualities to the plant. So if you have diarrhea or constipation, you can use the tea and it will help you in that way. Sometimes a poultice is what you need if you've got a wasp bite or a mosquito bite, something that's swelling on the skin. Basically, you could just take the leaves and the flowers, mash them up together with a bit of hot water, place them on your wound, maybe put a cotton cloth over it, and you'll feel the sting go out immediately. It's very, very healing. If you're in the middle of the bush like you are right now and you get a sting, you would just harvest, maybe the leaves and a few flowers here. Thank you very much. And I would take that, I'd chew it. You can really taste the astringency of this plant. I have a little cut here and I put it on my cut or my sting. This is called a spit poultice. You can see it just sticks on there. That's the mucilaginous part of this plant. And it's very soothing, cooling, and healing. So later on, we're going to go back into my kitchen and we're going to make some lovely fireweed flower mead fermentation. And then we're going to also create a lovely fireweed flower oil. And then we're going to make a fireweed flower vinegar with apple cider vinegar. So these are infusions. And then we'll be doing a tincture, an alcohol tincture with the roots, the leaves, and the flowers. Should be fun. So I'm here digging some fireweed roots, and generally you would harvest them early on in the spring or late in the autumn before the plant goes to flower. But you can see these aren't in flower. They're just establishing themselves in my garden bed. So I just want to take a peek at the roots to see actually if I can use these for medicine today. And how I'll know is that they'll be juicy. And there'll be like a little white core in the inside, and they're very mucilaginous. So I'm just going to pull some of that root. See that? So I can actually use those leaves as well. I don't want anything to go to waste. Oh, I'm cleaning the soil off the root, and I want to just check its viability. Ooh, it's coming off nicely. It feels like it's got a lot of moisture running through it. which is a good sign. If it's dry, it's not viable. So you can see that beautiful white and orange texture on it. Actually, it's a good root. When I have it in my mouth, it's really interesting. It feels like it's coated my whole mouth with like an oil. It's just actually quite lovely, and it's got a sweet flavor, but you still get that hint of tannins and astringent in it. So I'm going to gather some of these roots, and then we'll wash them off, cut them up, and we'll add them to a tincture with the leaves and the flowers. So here we are at my drying house, and this is where I dry all my herbs in the summer. So I not only dry fireweed, but of course rose petals, comfrey, wild mint, plantain, and lots of other northern herbs. But right now my drying house is full of fireweed. So we've gathered these beautiful fireweed flowers and leaves here today, and I just wanted to, we're going to use them in our remedies that we're making today. But I just wanted to give you a glimpse into my drying house. So you can see here I have some fireweed that I picked a couple days ago drying on these racks. Having good drying conditions is important, and the reason it is you don't want your flowers and leaves in direct sunlight. What happens is they bleach out. So I have screens, and they're non-metal screens. The plastic screens are good, or you could have muslin cloth or a wicker basket. And I have a nice airflow. I have 2 windows at either side, so I always have air circulating and flowing through. So when I'm just drying the flowers, I have them here on the rack, and I come by every day, and it's like playing the piano underneath, and I'm just moving the flowers around. So these have been here a couple days, and they're really starting to dry nicely. Once they're dried, what I do is then I'll put them into either a jar, a bag, or a plastic container, but you just don't want them to rehydrate. So when I gather the fireweed leaves and flowers this way, I like to just tie a string or an elastic around them. And you have to do it really tight, because when they're drying, they start to shrink, right? And then you lose some to gravity. So I'm just tying up. So there we go, I've got that tied up. And come on in here further, and you can see that I have all of this other fireweed drying. So it's quite beautiful. So that's drying your fireweed. So we're here in the kitchen, and I've got some of the fireweed flowers that we gathered this morning. I've got some of the fireweed leaves. And then I have some of the nice dried fireweed flowers that I got from the drying shack. First up, we'll be making some fireweed mead. So I've already started the mead, and what I've done is I've put 16 cups of water in this pot, and then I've added ½ a cup of fireweed flowers, and you could use dry or fresh, it doesn't really matter. I've had that just simmering for about an hour. So the next step is to strain this infusion of fireweed flowers. So let's get to that. So you can just see the flowers are spent. There's nothing left in them. And then I'm going to pour those back into a pot. And I'm not using the other pot because it's got a lot of flowers left in it. You can see the color of it, it's just beautiful. So now I've got this beautiful fireweed flower tea. So the next thing that I do is add fireweed honey. So I've got some beautifully locally produced honey. It was made in Watson Lake. So I've got 2 cups, 500 ml of honey. It doesn't have to be fireweed honey, you can use any kind of honey, but of course I love the theme of fireweed flower, fireweed honey. So the next thing that I'll do is pour this mead infusion with honey into this nice 4-liter jug. And I'd say, I'm just going to test it. It's just about room temperature. So before I put it into the bottle, I'm just going to add 2 teaspoons of yeast. So you can just get wine yeast. I've got this at the local wine store. So just scatter that in. So now that we've got that in there, the yeast, I'm going to give this a nice pour. So let's hope we get it all in there. Get the last dregs of that honey. So here we go. So I must have boiled it down a little bit too much. So at this point, you could add a little bit of water to it. Ideally, you'd like the water to reach the top, just like this one. So I can do that later. And then you put the airlock on it. And so the airlock as well needs to have water. And what this does basically is allows the fermentation to take place without any bad bacteria getting in there. And then I let it sit for about a month. Now, often alcohol isn't very good for you, but mead, being one of the oldest alcohols in the world, actually has some health benefits. It's full of enzymes, lots of nutrients, minerals, vitamins. So if you are going to drink alcohol, it's a wonderful beverage to have. Next up, we're making a fireweed infused oil. So basically, I've taken the fresh fireweed flowers and I've added them to a nice olive oil, and I've had them simmering here for a little while in the double boiler. So basically I used 1 part of the fireweed flowers to 2 parts of olive oil. I'm just going to pour them again through the cheesecloth like I did earlier. So we're doing infusions, that's what we're doing. And so another way to tell is, you see the plant matter is, it's quite crispy. Now don't throw this out. When my kids were young, what I used to do was I would take the cheesecloth with the flowers or the herbs in it, and I just put it in the freezer. So it was always great when they got an owie, they could just go to the freezer and put it on, and it would help. You could also actually eat these, put them in your smoothie, anything of that nature. So it's all edible and medicinal. You can use any oil. It doesn't have to be olive. You can use almond, you could use grapeseed, coconut oil, so whatever your heart's desire. So once you've poured the oil, it's really important to make sure that it's completely cooled down before you put the lid on it. And the reason is that you just don't want any condensation happening in there, because when you do, the oil will go off. You can store this out of direct sunlight on your kitchen counter, just like you would olive oil, or in your fridge if you want it to last a little longer. So next up, we're making a fireweed flower and leaf vinegar. So I'm going to put the fresh fireweed flowers in this jar, and then I'll add a few of the leaves. And I like to break the leaves up. I've got my fireweed flowers, I've got some leaves, and now I've got some apple cider vinegar. And so again, it's about 2 parts vinegar to 1 part plant matter. So one of the important things is to use a plastic lid. You don't use a metal lid when you're making apple cider or any kind of vinegars, because it'll rust the lid. So you always use a plastic lid. If you don't have any of these plastic lids, you could take a rim and use some plastic wrap. So the apple cider vinegar, once this is done, basically I'm going to shake it every day for a couple of weeks until I see that it's changing, that the fireweed flowers and leaves are looking spent. Then I'll put it through cheesecloth and strain it, compost the plant matter, and away we go. Fireweed vinegar, a must-have in your kitchen. So now we're going to be moving to making tea. I've got a nice infusion going here. And you see in this jar I have dried fireweed leaves and flour. I put 4 tablespoons of the tea into the jar and just poured hot water over it. So if you're just making a cup, 1 teaspoon of dried plant matter for a full cup of tea. So next up, we're going to be making a fireweed root leaf and flower tincture. So I've just washed the roots that we gathered this morning. And instead of using the knife, I think I'll just use my clippers. I've washed them off, all the soil off of them. I'll just cut them up. So I'm adding the root. So 1 part root. I'm going to take 1 part of the fireweed flowers, or the fireweed leaves, sorry. And then I'm going to add the fresh fireweed flowers. So I've got my roots, leaves, and flowers, and I've infused this in alcohol, in vodka, which is 40% alcohol. You could also use whiskey, you could use gin, anything of that nature. Wine, beer wouldn't have enough alcohol content to draw out the tannins and the medicinal properties from the plant matter, and also wouldn't preserve it. So I leave this for about a month. Cover it up. You can use a metal lid on tincture and give it a shake every day for a month. Don't forget on all of these remedies to put a label and the date that you've made them, just for your information, because otherwise you end up with all these jars around and you're not really sure what's what. There we go. So we made a fireweed oil, a tincture with alcohol, a fireweed vinegar with apple cider vinegar, and then we made a tea with water. We also made fireweed mead. So for more information about making the mead, you can visit my blog at beverleygray.com. You can also find my book, The Boreal Herbal, to find out more information about making teas, tinctures, oils, and vinegars. And then you could drop by my store on the main street of Whitehorse, Yukon, Aroma Borealis. Come say hi to myself or my staff. We'd be happy to answer any questions that you have. What a great day today, gathering all the fireweed flowers, the leaves and the roots, and now I'm going to enjoy the fruits of my labor. I've got some fireweed flower oil here. I'm going to put on my beautiful fireweed salad. I've got some of the fireweed vinegar that I made before, and I can't wait to eat that. Then I've got my fireweed flower mead. Wow! Wow, look at that. Oh, that's got some fuzz on it. I should wait till it goes down. That's pretty fun. Look at the color of that. Smells delish. I'm Beverley Gray. Thanks for joining me today on the Boreal Herbal. Sláinte.